In the cold darkness of space, far beyond the light of any star, a signal began to travel. It moved with purpose, cutting through the void like a blade. At first, it seemed like nothing more than static, a broken whisper of lost voices. But then the sound grew clear, and those who heard it knew it was not a call for help. It was not a request for peace. It was a warning. The last broadcast of mankind. The signal reached the ears of an empire that had long believed itself unstoppable. They were the conquerors of countless worlds, the rulers of systems, the destroyers of resistance. To them, Earth had always been small, a forgotten blue planet with fragile people who would bend or break. But now the empire listened to a voice, and that voice was not weak. The voice came slow and steady, calm but heavy with weight. It carried a message across the stars. You crossed the line, it said. You thought we would fall. You thought wrong. The aliens who received the signal sat in silence. Their warlords leaned closer to the speakers, their commanders frowned. This was not the voice of fear. This was not the voice of surrender. This was the voice of judgment. The broadcast continued, and though it was only sound, it felt alive. It carried something deeper than words, something sharp and dangerous. We warned you once. We told you to leave our worlds. But you did not listen. You came again, with fire and with chains. You thought you would break us. But you only woke us. The aliens shifted uneasily. For ages, no one had dared speak to them like this. They were the strong, the empire of iron and flame. They had crushed hundreds of races without hearing a single threat in return. And yet, from this small planet called Earth, came words that cut deeper than any weapon. The voice grew harder, colder, as though the speaker no longer cared for reason. You wanted war. Now you will see war. This is our final broadcast. Listen well, for there will not be another. Silence followed, but only for a moment. Then another layer of sound filled the message, deep, rumbling tones that almost shook the receivers. It was not music, not noise. It was something else. A signal behind the signal, hidden and complex. The alien commanders looked to each other. Some felt fear, though they would not admit it. The humans had sent not only words, but also something encrypted, something waiting to be understood. But even before they decoded it, the words alone had already left their mark. One commander, old and scarred from 100 battles, leaned back and said, "These humans, they are not afraid." And for the first time in centuries, the Empire's War Council felt the weight of doubt. On the other side of the stars, the broadcast continued to echo, bouncing from system to system, spreading across the Empire's territories. Wherever it went, it carried the same voice, the same warning, the same defiance. To allies of the Empire, it was a shock. To their slaves, it was hope. And to the Empire itself, it was a challenge. A line had been drawn, and mankind had made it clear. It would not be crossed again without consequence. The broadcast ended as suddenly as it began. No farewell, no explanation, only silence. But that silence was heavier than war drums. It pressed down on every commander who heard it. The galaxy had grown used to Earth's silence. Now Earth had spoken, and its voice promised fire. Long before the broadcast was sent, the story of mankind and the Empire had already begun. The aliens had arrived with arrogance, carrying banners of conquest and fleets that blotted out the stars. They did not come to speak. They did not come to trade. They came to demand. Their first words to Earth were not greetings, but orders. Surrender your world, surrender your people, surrender your future. Humanity was expected to kneel as so many others had done before. But Earth was not like the others. Earth resisted. The Empire did not forgive resistance. Their fleets rained fire on human colonies beyond the homeworld, smashing outposts on Mars and silencing settlements on distant moons. They believed this would break mankind's will. Instead, it ignited it. Every attack only hardened the hearts of humans, uniting them in anger. The broadcast that echoed across the stars was born from these moments, carved from blood and fire. Humanity remembered every insult, every act of cruelty, every time the Empire treated them as lesser. And when the final voice spoke, it carried the memory of all those wounds. The line had been crossed when the Empire enslaved smaller races and expected Earth to follow. The line had been crossed when alien soldiers dragged human prisoners into chains, parading them like trophies on conquered worlds. The line had been crossed when children cried under skies filled with burning ships, when families were torn apart by an empire that saw no value in their lives. Mankind had drawn a boundary in silence, a limit never spoken but deeply felt, and the Empire shattered it without thought. Now there would be a reckoning. The aliens never understood the human mind. They thought fear would silence resistance, but fear only fed human defiance. The more the Empire pressed, the more humans learned to adapt, to fight, to strike back in ways the Empire did not expect. While the aliens relied on overwhelming power, humans relied on will, on cunning, on the fire inside that refused to die. The broadcast reminded the Empire of that fire. It spoke of every colony destroyed, every city scarred, every soldier who stood to fight knowing the cost. It reminded them that mankind had nothing left to lose, and nothing is more dangerous than a people who refuse to surrender. In their great halls of command, the alien warlords replayed the signal again and again. Some dismissed it as empty rage. Others, wiser and older, felt the truth hidden within. They saw the stubborn spirit in those words and remembered ancient warnings: never underestimate a desperate enemy. Yet the Empire had already crossed too far. They had spilled too much blood to turn back. The humans had given them one last chance to leave, but arrogance blinded them. They believed themselves untouchable, masters of the stars. But the line had been crossed, and mankind was no longer simply defending. They were preparing. Beneath the surface of Earth, in the silence of hidden bases, in the shadows of asteroid fields, humans were building weapons the galaxy had never seen. The Empire's spies whispered of strange experiments, of fleets that vanished into black space and returned with new technology. They dismissed these whispers as fear. They would soon learn it was truth. The final broadcast was not only a warning, it was a declaration. It said the days of being prey were over. It said mankind would rise from the ashes of its broken colonies and strike with a fury the galaxy could not imagine. The Empire had crossed the line, but now it was mankind's turn to cross it back, to step into the role of hunter. And though the warlords laughed and spoke with pride, deep in their hearts they felt a shadow of doubt. For the first time, the conquerors began to wonder if they had awakened something they could not control. The Empire believed humans were still weak, small creatures standing against giants, but what they did not see was the truth hidden behind silence. While alien fleets pushed forward with confidence, Earth had been preparing in the shadows. Every attack, every invasion, every loss had taught mankind something new. They studied their enemy, they learned their weaknesses, they adapted faster than any other race in the galaxy. What the Empire thought was defeat was only disguise, because every battle gave humans more knowledge. In hidden shipyards carved deep inside asteroids, human engineers worked without rest, building vessels unlike any that had come before. They were smaller than the Empire's massive warships, but faster, sharper, and filled with weapons that used not just metal and fire, but ideas that no other species dared to test. Scientists who once dreamed of reaching stars now designed weapons to burn fleets, and minds that once studied the mysteries of life now turned those mysteries into tools of war. The Empire did not understand the human gift for innovation. Where other civilizations followed rules and repeated old designs, humans broke limits, bent laws of physics, and created machines that should not have been possible. In underground laboratories, they unleashed artificial intelligence smarter and faster than any commander. In secret bunkers, they developed drones that could fight without fear, swarms of machines that moved like storms through the void. And all of this was hidden, buried in the quiet places of space, far from alien eyes. The Empire sent spies to find the truth, but spies never returned. Entire scouting fleets vanished without leaving wreckage behind, as if the stars themselves had swallowed them. Reports reached alien warlords that human colonies which once lay in ruins now stood rebuilt, stronger than before, guarded by ships cloaked in silence. But the Empire laughed, refusing to believe. They told themselves that mankind was desperate, that mankind was bluffing, that nothing could rise against their power. Yet the final broadcast was proof that the bluff was over. The voice that carried across the stars was calm because it carried the weight of preparation. It was not a desperate cry of a dying race but the confidence of one that had sharpened its claws in the dark. Among the hidden allies of humanity were races once enslaved by the Empire. They had watched humans fight back, and they began to whisper hope. Quiet agreements were made, secret supply lines carried resources to Earth, and in return humans promised freedom once the Empire fell. Slowly, a network formed in the shadows of the galaxy, a resistance fueled not by fear but by belief in mankind's defiance. The Empire never noticed because it never looked down. It had grown blind with pride. The hidden power of mankind grew larger each day. Weapons of energy strong enough to pierce the shields of great warships, stealth systems that could mask fleets as if they were shadows, war machines that moved like ghosts through space. All of this was prepared in silence. The voice of the broadcast had hinted at it, but the truth was far greater than any alien commander could imagine. The Empire thought they had crossed the line with no consequence, but in truth they had walked into a trap that was still unfolding. The humans had studied the Empire's strategies, their patterns, their arrogance, and they built their weapons around those flaws. They did not plan to meet the Empire in open battle where size and numbers mattered. They planned to strike where it hurt the most, fast and unseen, cutting the Empire apart piece by piece. Even as the warlords laughed, their fleets were already in danger. Hidden among asteroid belts and nebula clouds, human ships waited like hunters with knives, ready for the Empire to come closer. The hidden power of mankind was not only in weapons and ships but in their spirit. Every soldier, every pilot, every citizen carried the memory of colonies burned, of families lost, of the line that had been crossed. They carried anger, but they also carried unity, something the Empire's fractured rule could never understand. Humanity had become one, bound together by defiance, and that unity was more powerful than any fleet. The Empire would soon see it. The hidden power was waiting, and when it was unleashed, the galaxy would remember the day mankind stopped being prey and became the storm. The broadcast did not end with calm words of warning, it shifted into something colder, something that cut deeper than any weapon. The voice that had spoken for mankind no longer carried patience, it carried the weight of final judgment. "This is your last chance," it said, each word like stone against steel. "Leave our worlds. Leave our skies. Do not test us again." The tone was slow, steady, and merciless. Even through the vast emptiness of space, the Empire's commanders felt unease creep into their bones. This was not a bluff, not a desperate cry, but a sentence being spoken before the punishment. The alien warlords who gathered around the broadcast chambers exchanged uneasy glances, though most hid their fear behind arrogance. They had crushed countless enemies, and none had ever dared to speak with such venom. But the humans did not sound like other races. Their voice carried something sharp, something unshakable, as if behind those words stood not just armies but an entire species united in rage. Reports began to pour in from the edges of the Empire's reach. Small fleets sent to test human defenses had vanished. Outposts close to human borders had fallen silent, their lights dark, their signals cut. At first the Empire claimed it was malfunctions, storms of space, simple mistakes. But the truth was harder to ignore with every passing day. Human forces were moving, not in the open like fools, but in shadows, with precision, erasing fleets without leaving wreckage behind. The spies who once returned with secrets no longer came back at all. And through all this, the broadcast kept repeating across different frequencies, a voice like a ghost whispering into every system it reached. "You dared cross the line, now you will pay." The Empire began to feel the weight of those words. Their commanders ordered stronger fleets to push toward human space, but still doubt lingered. Why had smaller fleets vanished so easily? Why were the humans so silent except for this message? The warning felt too confident, too prepared. Some commanders suggested retreating, regrouping, leaving Earth alone before things grew worse, but pride silenced them. The Empire had never backed down, and it would not start now. Yet inside the grand halls of command, silence grew heavy. No one would speak it aloud, but the fear was spreading. Something about the human broadcast unsettled even the strongest of them. The voice did not shout, did not rage. It was calm, steady, and final, like a judge who already knew the verdict. "This is not a threat," the voice continued. "This is a promise. You will see the cost of your arrogance. You will know what it means to awaken a people who will never kneel." The Empire's rulers clenched their claws and fangs, but still the unease burned. They had ruled through fear for centuries, and now for the first time, fear was being given back to them. Their own soldiers whispered about the humans. Slave races they had once crushed began to stir with hope. Across the stars, the voice kept echoing, a curse upon the Empire, a reminder that their actions had crossed a line that could not be undone. The warning was turning darker with every repetition, less like a plea and more like a death sentence already written. And though the Empire laughed in public, in the silence of their war rooms they began to wonder. Had they made the greatest mistake of their rule? The Empire finally moved with all its strength, sending a great armada toward human space, a fleet so massive it stretched across the stars like a sea of fire. To the alien warlords, this was the final move, the crushing blow that would erase mankind once and for all. Their ships were heavy with weapons, their soldiers eager for blood, their commanders certain that no world could resist such power. Yet what they did not know was that humanity had been waiting for this moment. The trap had already been prepared, carefully woven over years of silence and planning. Every asteroid field near human borders, every nebula cloud, every dark sector of space had been studied and shaped into battlegrounds. Hidden mines slept within rocks, cloaked satellites watched silently, and human fleets drifted unseen in the shadows, waiting for the signal. As the alien armada moved forward with pride, the broadcast returned once more. The same calm voice filled their channels, cutting through their communication lines as if the humans were speaking from inside their very ships. "You dared cross the line," the voice said, steady and cold. "Now you will pay." At first the Empire laughed, dismissing it as bravado. But then the fleets began to vanish. It started at the edges. A squadron of destroyers entered an asteroid belt and never came out. Another group patrolling near a nebula sent one final cry before their signal went silent forever. Panic grew among the lower ranks, though commanders tried to hide it. The humans were striking, not with open battles but with precision, cutting small pieces from the armada, tearing it apart without being seen. The Empire ordered scans, but their sensors found nothing. The enemy seemed invisible, moving like ghosts through the void. And still, the broadcast repeated in the background, calm and merciless, as if mocking their confusion. The alien fleet tried to tighten formation, pulling their ships closer together, but this only made them easier targets. A sudden burst of light shattered the darkness as a massive battleship was split in half by weapons the Empire had never seen. Its wreckage burned in silence, drifting across the stars, and the fleet knew this was no accident. Humanity had sprung the trap. Across the battle zone, hidden stations activated, releasing swarms of drones that struck like locusts, overwhelming ships in seconds. Mines hidden inside asteroid shells exploded, tearing apart cruisers before they even realized they were under attack. The humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon, every piece of space working against the Empire. The alien warlords screamed orders, their pride collapsing into anger, but no command could save them. The trap had been set too well, and every move they made only pushed them deeper into disaster. The voice of the broadcast returned once more, colder now, almost filled with satisfaction. "You thought we were weak. You thought we would kneel. You thought wrong. This is the price of your arrogance." As ships burned and fleets fell silent, the Empire realized too late that they had underestimated mankind. They had believed numbers and firepower would decide the war. But the humans had fought with patience, with planning, with the fury of a people who refused to break. One by one, the mighty warships of the Empire turned into wreckage drifting in the dark. The trap was working, and the hunters had become the hunted. The galaxy that once laughed at Earth would soon remember this moment, the day when humanity rose from the shadows and showed its teeth. The Empire had crossed the line, but now it was the humans who pushed forward, step by step, strike by strike, dragging their enemy into a war it could no longer control. The Empire's fleets had always been symbols of fear, mighty walls of steel and fire that brought worlds to their knees, but now those fleets were burning, broken, and scattered across the stars. What began as a campaign of conquest had turned into a nightmare of silence and loss. Commanders who once spoke with arrogance now whispered with doubt, their voices trembling as reports came in of entire armadas vanishing into the dark. Humanity's trap had shattered their confidence, but worse was the truth that followed: this was only the beginning. Human forces struck with speed and precision, never staying in one place, never fighting on the Empire's terms. Each attack carried the message of vengeance, each victory marked by the echo of the broadcast: "You dared cross the line, now you will pay." Alien soldiers, once proud of serving the Empire, now marched with fear in their hearts. They no longer faced prey, they faced predators. Battleships that once dominated skies were torn apart by swarms of drones, their hulls ripped open before they could even fire. Colonies loyal to the Empire went silent as human strike teams appeared from nowhere, destroying command centers and freeing the enslaved races who had suffered for centuries. The galaxy watched in shock. For so long the Empire had been unchallenged, yet now, piece by piece, it was being undone by those it once thought too small to matter. The price of defiance was being paid, not by humans, but by the Empire that had underestimated them. The warlords sat in their chambers, their claws trembling as they read the endless reports of defeat. Entire fleets gone, colonies lost, supply lines cut. The humans were not only fighting, they were dismantling the Empire itself, tearing it apart like hunters breaking the bones of prey. And everywhere the broadcast repeated, not only in military channels but across civilian networks, across the homes of the enslaved, across the stars themselves: "This is our final broadcast. Remember these words. Mankind does not forgive." The voice was like a shadow in every corner of the Empire, and its weight crushed morale. Soldiers deserted, allies betrayed the Empire, and slaves rose up in rebellion, inspired by the humans who dared to fight. For the first time in history, the Empire was no longer feared. It was pitted, it was hated, and it was losing. The price of defiance was no longer measured in battleships or soldiers, but in the collapse of an empire's very power. In desperation, the rulers tried to rally their forces, commanding their fleets to strike directly at Earth, but even that was a mistake. When they came near the homeworld, they found not a fragile blue planet but a fortress of steel and fire. Orbital defenses lit up the skies, human fleets appeared from hidden positions, and every inch of space around Earth was a battlefield waiting to devour intruders. The Empire's fleets that dared approach were torn apart faster than anyone had imagined, their wreckage burning in the void for all the galaxy to see. The humans had not only survived, they had become something more. The price of defiance was being collected with interest, and it was not yet finished. For every colony burned, a world of the Empire now suffered. For every human enslaved, an alien prison was broken open, its guards slaughtered, its captives freed. Humanity had unleashed its fury, and the Empire was drowning in it. Even the oldest warlords, veterans of countless campaigns, now spoke in fear of mankind, whispering that they had awakened a storm that could not be stopped. The price of defiance was clear: the Empire had dared to cross the line, and now it faced a people who would not stop until the galaxy itself remembered the cost of arrogance. The galaxy had grown silent, watching the Empire collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Systems that once trembled at the sight of alien warships now whispered the name of Earth with awe and fear. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had broken the chains of tyranny and turned the hunters into the hunted. And then, when the fighting reached its final stage, when the Empire's heart was trembling and its rulers clung to the last fragments of their power, the broadcast returned one final time. Across every channel, across every star system, the voice of mankind filled the void, calm, steady, and heavy with victory. "This is our final broadcast," the voice declared. "You dared to cross the line, and now you have paid the price. Let this be a lesson written in fire across the galaxy." The words carried like thunder, reaching soldiers, rulers, slaves, and free worlds alike. The Empire's emperor sat frozen in his throne, his claws digging into the armrests as the message played before him. He had once been the master of countless civilizations, but now he was nothing more than a ruler of ashes. The broadcast did not speak with anger now, but with certainty, the voice of a people who knew their place in history had changed forever. "We are mankind," the voice continued, "and we do not forget. We do not forgive. To those who seek peace, we will offer peace. To those who seek chains, we will break them. And to those who dare cross the line we have drawn, know this: we will rise again and again, until none remain to threaten us." The galaxy trembled at those words. To some, they were a promise of protection, to others, a warning of judgment. But to the Empire, they were a death sentence. Already its colonies were falling, its fleets destroyed, its power broken beyond repair. The humans had not only defended themselves, they had reshaped the balance of the stars. The broadcast ended with silence, but that silence carried more weight than 1,000 battles. Across distant worlds, oppressed races rose against their masters, inspired by the defiance of Earth. Across free systems, rulers began to speak carefully, measuring every word when they mentioned mankind. And within the ruins of the Empire, the last survivors whispered in fear, praying the humans would show mercy, but knowing mercy would be rare. The Emperor, once proud and untouchable, sat alone as his palace shook under the assault of rebel forces. The voice of mankind echoed in his mind, each word like a blade. "This is our final broadcast. Remember it well. The age of mankind has begun." And as the palace walls crumbled, as the Empire's banners fell into dust, he understood the truth too late. Humanity had not only survived, it had risen. It had taken its place among the stars as something greater than prey, greater than slaves, greater even than conquerors. Humanity had become the storm, the shadow, the reckoning. And the galaxy would never forget.